is Jeffrey Koch. Jeffrey Koch serves as the Chief Innovation Officer and Chief Information Officer for Mill Creek Residential. He is the chair of the Innovation Committee and a member of the Audit and Administrative Committee. In his role, Mr. Koch is responsible for overseeing innovation, building technology, information technology, cybersecurity, and ESG, with the goal to transform how Mill Creek leverages technology as a competitive advantage and increase the value of Mill Creek's communities. Mr. Koch joined Mill Creek in December 2015 and has developed a robust team to digitally transform the organization while driving innovation, automation, investment value, net operating income, and operational efficiencies across development, acquisitions, construction, property management, asset management, and the national services functions. Prior to joining Mill Creek from 2005 to 2015, Mr. Koch worked for Celanese International Corporation, a global technology and specialty materials company that engineers and manufactures a wide variety of products essential to everyday living. Mr. Koch held a variety of positions at Celanese and ascended quickly through the ranks. His most recent role at Celanese was Head of Information Security, Chief Information Security Officer, with overall responsibilities for SAP Security, the Security Operations Center, Security Architecture, and Process Control Networks. He led remediation efforts and developed the strategy for the company with regards to data classification, data protection, and monitoring. Mr. Koch graduated from Baylor University with a Bachelor of Business Administration in Management Information Systems. Please join me in welcoming Jeffrey to the stage.
Hello and welcome. My name is Jeff Koch. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer and Chief Information Officer for Mill Creek Residential. We're a property owner and operator in the multifamily residential space and the single family build to rent space. We have about 23,000 units under management today and about another 13,000 in our pipeline. So we're fully integrated. So we both develop, we construct, we property manage, we asset manage, and we also have an investment management vehicle as well as an organization. We're about 1,000 employees across the US. All of our 85-ish communities are on the West Coast, Denver, Dallas, Austin, Houston, and from Miami up the East Coast up through Boston, in most of the prominent cities along those locations. We've been expanding in Phoenix and Nashville and Philadelphia and the Carolinas, some within the single family rental business. So I'm excited to speak with y'all today. What I'm going to be talking about is really the digital foundation, the essential framework for owners and operators to maximize NOI. And I think this is a really important topic because so many people are trying to figure out how do they move forward, what do they want to do today in order to not only get a return immediately, but what does the long term look like? And how do they really capitalize on the technologies that are available to them today, but be flexible to capitalize on the technologies that will be available down the road? And so I want to speak to you all today about that. But let me give you a little bit of my background. I didn't come from real estate originally. I've been in the space now as a CIO for about 6 years. But prior to that, I actually came from global chemical manufacturing, where I worked in a large technology shop with 300 IT professionals for Fortune 500. And we had a global presence. And so I had teams in China and Singapore and Germany and the US. And I ran global cybersecurity for them for a while. Prior to that, I did project management and program management. And I was actually a technical analyst where I was getting my hands dirty and running firewalls and global area networks and the infrastructure side of an IT shop. And so it was important to understand some of those fundamentals and how that applies today in the world of real estate. And really refining our processes, refining how we design, implement, and manage things so that we can have the most full encompassing system that's secure, that provides data security and data privacy, as well as gives us the opportunity to capitalize on incredible technologies that our residents are desiring. So we're seeing a strong push right now for the fundamentals. And the reason that the fundamentals are important is because they enable so much more. And what I mean by fundamentals are connectivity and access control, right? Those two areas are absolutely fundamental to get right at the beginning of any job that you're building and constructing, anything you're going in and acquiring and renovating, or anything that you already have as a long-term asset that you're looking at. Okay, how do I revamp this? Do I go back and do some retrofit? What does that look like? How do I get into this world of prop tech, right? And the large part is that connectivity is incredibly important to make that become a reality. And then the access control is such an enabler to so many other things. And so many of these systems have been very decentralized and disparate over the years that if we can find a way to centralize them, we can find a way to capitalize on them. And so that's what I want to speak today about with each of you. So let's jump into connectivity. I want to break apart a few different views into what connectivity looks like today, because I think a lot of us are aware of them, but we might not be fully aware of how it then enables the future of the community. So the first being this idea of internet for the residents, right? And there's multiple different channels of how we can deliver that internet to the residents. It could be via bulk, which is a new upward going trend, right? And so in the bulk idea, it's this idea that you blanket Wi-Fi, you blanket connectivity across the entire site. And it's not all Wi-Fi. Sometimes it's hard plugs in the walls within their bedroom or living room or kitchen, right? But it's the idea that the entire community is one connected place. And so your resident can not only operate in their own unit and home, but they can walk out into the corridor, they can go into the elevator, they can go to the common area, they can go to the pool area, the garage, and still have connectivity without having to get onto their cellular plan. And the reason for that and why that's so important is the way our buildings are architected today, Wi-Fi calling is becoming more and more important. And it really drives a cost savings to us by not having to go do a DAS system, distributed antenna system throughout the building, or some sort of a cellular boost system. Wi-Fi calling is really that aid to it. Long term, I'll explain later why that's important, because there are plugins to what 5G can do with the Wi-Fi network. And so I think that's important to understand the bulk model versus the retail model, which is where the resident is given 3 or 4 options of different telecom companies, Verizon, T-Mobile, Comcast, whatever, right? Companies that are coming in that they can get, 300 meg, a gig, or whatever directly to their unit. They sign up for it, they get that. And they go forward with paying directly to that supplier. Where in the bulk model, the idea is that a resident can come in and the owner is offering them a set rate for a set service. And the reason is because the owner has more buying power. They're doing it not just for one individual home or unit, they're doing all 300 homes or units and saying, we can get these all at a lower price for you and at a reliable speed. You pay us and we'll provide the service to you through this third party. And that third party is reliable for it and owns and maintains it. But in the retail model, it's that optionality view. So bulk is also changing in some, that it's now also doing this opt-in model where you can bring in a bulk provider, they put in the framework across your community, but at the same time, they provide an opt-in model. So not every resident has to have it. They can, just say, hey, I want that provider. I'll opt into the bulk model, right? And your penetration rate over your community should grow over time towards that because it should be a lower price based on the buying power you brought forward. And so it's important to understand the differences between those two. But the reason that I think a trend is happening with bulk is because its capabilities to enable the rest of the technology vision of the community. And what I mean by this is when you go in with a retail model, it's just fiber going directly to the residence unit or some sort of Cat 6 cabling going directly to the residence unit, and they have a contract with them. Well, you don't get to traverse that network. So if you wanted Wi-Fi in your corridors or Wi-Fi in your common area spaces, you may have to go forward and do some other separate network that is disparate, meaning that they have to then change what they click on. So from a resident experience, this makes it harder. They're in their unit that says Jeff's Wi-Fi, right? And I'm on Jeff's Wi-Fi. But now I want to go into the corridor. I have to jump over to Mill Creek's resident Wi-Fi, right? Well, that disparate connectivity is a bit of a challenge, where in the bulk model, the idea is that you can stay on one Wi-Fi SSID and traverse the entire network for that. And I think it's important to know the differences between those, because resident experience becomes more and more important with the enabling of these other services. The other opportunity in bulk is that it does allow our deals to become more accretive because of how you design it, right? If I can go in and have the buying power for all of this, there's a small profit margin I can create that can create a revenue vehicle to the community that allows us to then enable these other technologies for the residents, right? And create that better customer experience than they're seeing today. And so those are the two fundamentals for internet connectivity to the residents. There are other ways to do it as well. There's always a new way to do it. So there's different models with millimeter wave coming from the rooftop. There's new 5G technologies out there today that you can do a rooftop lease with, and then you could do a backup circuit with them, or maybe even a primary circuit with them for connectivity. Tesla just came out with these new antennas that can reach and do satellite internet. And so there's always going to be new things, but the fundamental will always ring true, that reliability is necessary in the multifamily space. And so the more reliable a circuit can be with a hardwire connectivity is going to be necessary, right? And so being able to blanket a community with Wi-Fi needs to be the first thought towards that connectivity problem. The second element to that as well is that by having a bulk program in place, we're starting to see you don't have to have some sort of a management layer network separate, right? You can have it within the same infrastructure, so the same cabling, the same access points that distribute the Wi-Fi to the residents, you can use to manage your IoT network, your Internet of Things network, all the hubs within the building, or the thermostats, or the leak sensors, or solar paneling, or different energy management programs, etc. And so it's an enabler to be able to build that connectivity. Then from there's this future vision I talked about earlier of 5G. And so while I talk about rooftop leases and 5G, there's also the idea that we could go forward with something called Citizen Broadband Radio System. And I think there's another talk happening at RETCON this week from Castle Systems about what they're doing within CBRS. I think there's a lot of other companies doing this too, where they're building this idea of a neutral host network, that you build this bulk internet or bulk Wi-Fi solution that you can plug and play CBRS devices onto it and create this 5G in-building experience. And I think that's incredibly important to think about, because there's revenue opportunities tied to that in the future. Those haven't been vetted yet. It's still a build in process, but you're thinking about the future early on here for that. But it's the idea that eventually you could get some cellular programming into the building for your residents that improves their resident experience. And again, at what cost is that to do, and what does that return look like for you? I think there's incredible financial calculations here that really then add to the NOI of the building, because what you're doing is you're bringing this revenue stream in for multiple vehicles. You may have the base internet revenue stream, you may have a 5G one, right? And you just build this technology package as a whole. Then the future that I think is starting to evolve now, and this is something that's interesting and we all want to watch it, is this idea of the smart home, right? We've all heard it for the last 5 years of the smart home and multifamily, and what does that look like? Well, they all started with the home, the unit itself, but I think it's branched out to be the smart building now, right? Because I think people started seeing that the returns were greater for the common area savings, for the way that thermostats were set up in the units for vacant units, as well as other locations for how access control worked, etc. So the smart home has evolved to the smart building. And in that, we're starting to see that more providers are moving to this hubless model. So when it first rolled out, everyone had a little hub, or a gateway, they called it. And that would go either in the resident unit or in the corridors, and that would control all the devices over Z-Wave or Zigbee. And that's still relevant. It still is a great model to deploy those, and may continue to be a great model to deploy those. But we're starting to see some of the providers in the bulk space having that within their access points. So you could have a Zigbee Z-Wave radio within your access point. So now instead of 2 pieces of physical hardware, you have 1. So cost savings comes from that. Management, you don't have to have 2 different things managing them. You now just have 1, right? And so you're starting to see this collapse and consolidation of devices, which leads to a better management longer term for us. And so I think that's really important to see how we're operating there. So you think about that, bulk is becoming more and more prevalent, but it's also because it's improved so vastly. Internet in itself has become a commodity, right? Everyone has it. It's everywhere. What makes one provider different than the next provider? Not a lot, right? 1 gig down and 1 gig up is the same as 1 gig down, 1 gig up with the next guy, as long as it's reliable, right? And so what really starts making the differences are some of the small things of how they interconnect, or what devices they run or manage, or how they're doing their smart building technologies and how they're incorporating it together, what their product roadmap looks like, of how they're going to integrate and consolidate all this stuff to drive further cost savings to the owner operators of the actual infrastructure, but then actually the cost savings that come from it. So I'm going to talk about that in a little bit as we go up. So that's the first piece of connectivity. That's incredibly important as the first digital foundation, because everything builds on top of that. The second element of that digital foundation that needs to be thought about is access control. So when I talk about access control, I'm talking about building access. So just getting in and out of the building for both residents and guests. How do the guests get in? Is there only one door allocated to them, or are there multiples? What do we do for garage access, common area access, or amenity area? The home or the unit access, and then elevator access. The idea that you can limit people to different floors, or if you have a delivery service coming in, that they could get a little QR code that gets them access through the front door, gets them access into the common area spaces, and then goes from there and provides access into the elevator up to the floor so they can knock on the resident's door, specifically at their unit and home. So I think that's really important. Access control itself, having one holistic system to govern it all, is very crucial to enabling so many more services. Think about self-touring. Self-touring is a lot simpler if you have one access control system to control it, whether that access control system has PIN codes, or whether it has a fob system, or whether it's phone access. You got to think through the intricacies and the risks of each different model, but there are some good options out there as it relates to access control. And so it's fundamental we get that right, because that enables the other services that I'm about to go through. So let's talk about those other services really quickly, because I think those are important to understand. And I'm going to leave you with a couple thoughts here at the end. So the first thing I want to talk about is energy management. So as we look at the buildings of which we're building today, or we're renovating, or we're retrofitting, energy management needs to be the number one thought as we go into this, because it's a huge cost savings to the owner operators and to the residents. And so the common area versus vacant units, vacant units are really good to get savings on during a lease up, right? But once you're operational and you're 95% occupied, you're gonna have a lot lower savings around vacant units. Although it's still important to have some savings, it's definitely not as big as when you were in a lease up and you had a lot more units vacant, right? But with smart thermostats, you can control those vacant units that move in, move out, turnover, make your maintenance process simpler, and get some cost savings there by turning down the thermostat when no one's present, or no one's home, or on some sort of schedule. Common areas, though, are becoming a bigger play. We're seeing some massive cost savings across the portfolio for common area savings, because when you cool and heat corridors and common area spaces such as the gym or the fitness center, or some club room, those areas, you can control temperatures and allow a savings to the organization at a much wider scale, because at least in our portfolio, we pay for those common areas and their energy utilization, versus we do a pass through for the resident units. So by enabling the resident units with a smart thermostat, you're bringing a cost savings directly to your residents. Maybe 8% on heating cost and 10% on cooling cost. So it's pretty significant. And then when it's vacant, you can get up to 30%, even more sometimes, depending on how much you're willing to change the temperature thresholds there. But energy management goes further into demand response and working with local utility companies that are willing to pay you to change your temperature 3 to 4 degrees during an incident or event, right? So they're having a peak energy usage. They want to change your thermostats 3 to 4 degrees. They're willing to pay you for that. So not only the savings you get from changing your thermostats 3 to 4 degrees, you're also getting paid by the local utility. So there's some savings there. Tying this into solar and how solar could distribute and pay some of those common area spaces. Solar is becoming more advantageous, and some of the tax credits are making it more advantageous. So then you get into these add-ons as well as leak detection and water management and doing water flow monitoring and be able to monitor the flow through the pipes to determine anomalies or variances that say, hey, something's happening here that shouldn't happen. We need to get in there and fix it so that we stop a leak. Being able to correlate that with a leak detector, now you have more accurate data to actually be able to limit water mitigation losses. So that's really big. I talked earlier about rooftop leases and the advantageous ways that some of these technologies allow you to have a rooftop lease that you can not only take advantage from the actual lease, but because you put it up there, you may be actually able to add fiber back in to distribute a backup circuit up there or something like that. It enables the smart home from thermostats to shades to lights to fans to voice activated devices to doorbells or whatever else you want to do within your units themselves to enable those. So the connectivity and the access control, all those. But then you get into some of these other ones like package delivery, right? And if you have an access control system that goes all the way through and a connectivity system that goes all the way through, you've enabled that package delivery even further, right? Maybe some of these companies are starting to work on the idea of full delivery to unit, right? Or at least to a concierge group or to a package room. But instead of your leasing staff having to get involved with that, they now have an expedited way to do wayfinding to exactly where the package needs to go, and they check everything in as it comes in. So package delivery can become simpler. Self-touring is a huge one, right? So with wayfinding, having Wi-Fi throughout the building so that your residents or prospects that are coming in can understand, okay, I need to be in the fitness center. Okay, it knows I'm in the fitness center. A pop-up comes up, tells me about the fitness center. Now says I need to be in unit 101A. It navigates me to unit 101A because I'm on the Wi-Fi. And, the second I walked in, it said, hey, join our Wi-Fi as part of the self-touring experience so that they have a great experience going through that. It enables them into doors, etc. You get into predictive maintenance. With connectivity, all these devices can have IoT that sends back messages for predictive maintenance. Short-term rentals to be able way you can do access control and just hand out temporary codes to people, enabling short-term rentals. Co-working spaces, being able to separate off certain co-working spaces. Maybe you even allow the public into those co-working spaces, or the coffee shop that you have in the common area, but you've isolated it from the rest of the building because of how you've done access control, but the residents have easy in and out, food delivery. All those things are enablers for this. The last thing I want to leave you with is as you go through this process of building the digital foundation, thinking about the connectivity and the access control, think about the idea of, do I own it or do I lease it, right? Do I want to put the upfront capital into this process and own more of it? Well, typically in those models, you get a bigger revenue share with the infrastructure provider. And so there's some opportunities to paying more capital up front, but sometimes you don't have that, and you can, basically say, no, I'm not going to own it all. I'm going to have you own more of it, and I'm going to take a lower revenue share. Well, that still may be beneficial to you. So being able to run the economics on that is important. And then the last thing I'll say is in-source or outsource. Do you want to design this yourself and implement it yourself and manage it yourself? Or do you want to find a partner that really owns the entire process and can design it and operate it for yourself? Or do you want to go forward with your own team? And do you have the resources and skills necessary to pull all these pieces together? Or is it nicer to say, hey, all of my technology infrastructure should be outsourced to a particular company that runs the connectivity, that does the access control, that does the smart home? You're starting to see more of these suppliers out there today. They own everything. It's not just internet. It's not just access control. It's not just this, right? They've developed everything, and they have these really strong partnerships with the others that maybe are the manufacturers behind them of the locks or everything else, but they own that for you and manage it for you. I think there's some major advantageous reasons for doing that as a company, because it takes a lot of load off of your own resources and allows it to be outsourced. It may help with some of the capital infusion for renovations, etc. But I think in the end, it comes down to be smart about the design, find people that understand how to do this securely, how to do it effectively, and how to do it where they're saving you money by consolidating the amount of things into one package versus all these disparate individual packages, right? So hopefully some of that was educational and informational to y'all. I really appreciate the time today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to talk. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I think it's linkedin.com/Jeffrey Koch, JEFFREYKOK. I appreciate the time, and y'all take care. Bye.
What a great session, Jeffrey. That's it for today's general session. I hope you found it eye-opening. We're going to take a quick break before our track sessions begin at 2:30 Eastern Time. We'll have 4 tracks today: property tech, asset management, operations tech, and the innovation stage, where you'll find founders of leading tech startups. All tracks have world-class speakers, so you can't go wrong. Have the best digital conference day of your life.